السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Peace be upon you all. We'd like to welcome you to this meeting, which we prepared for in order to launch the report on the justice for the abductees. We'd like to welcome everyone. And this is a meeting organized by the association. We start with the opening remarks of Ms. Abductees Al-Haj, the mother of the abductees. So please, you have the floor. We would like to welcome all the participants, all protocols observed. So welcome everyone to this meeting where we launch our meeting, the report of the Association about the rights. The human rights work in a country like Yemen is difficult and thorny, and it becomes more complicated and difficult in light of the armed conflicts and the gross violations of human rights that are being perpetrated in Yemen by all conflict parties. The association has worked since its establishment to provide advocacy for the issues of rights and freedoms and to advocate against arbitrary detention and to achieve justice and to support the abductees. And it had a remarkable impact in the human rights scene. So the association supported the issues or the cases of the abductees by writing, mobilizing, and raising the awareness. And reports were one of the means that was used by the association in order to present a clear picture about the violations that the abductees are subjected to in relation the victims of the abduction, the detention, the arbitrary detention, the enforced disappearance and torture in the Republic of Yemen, and the violations committed by all conflict parties. The association worked to deliver the voices of the victims to all international platforms and to the government of Yemen in order to take actions and to bear its responsibility towards this issue. And these reports, or this report, which we celebrate its release today, was preceded by the launch of 10 in terms of the attacks on the right to life and liberty, the humiliation of dignity and the torture they suffered made them lose their minds. And this requires that justice is achieved to them and redress is provided. And this is a very important step towards social peace, which we all hope to be partners in building and sustaining. The association is not isolated from the rest of the organizations working in the human rights field. The association is in contact with a number of organizations, human rights organizations operating in Yemen, which all adopt the call for accountability, justice, and compensation for the victims of the kidnapping, detention, enforced disappearance, and torture. And the compensation should commensurate with the extent of violations committed against them, including providing guarantees that such violations will not be repeated. And the association calls for those involved in committing these violations to be held accountable and to prevent impunity. And here I cannot help but extend my sincere thanks and deep gratitude to the team that worked with unparalleled dedication to complete this report in light of this exceptional situation the country is going through. And would like to welcome everyone, and we will have highlights from the report. Thank you, Ms. Abductees Al-Haj, the mother of the abductees and the prisoners in the Republic of Yemen. And now we will move to a flash that is presenting the report that will be launched this evening. If you can rewind it with the voice. We still have an issue with the voice. So if you can replay it with the sound. Or maybe we can display it later on. Okay, we will move to highlights, to present highlights from the report. The association worked seriously since its establishment in April 2016 to present the suffering of the abductees and the prisoners. And as part of its efforts to deliver the message to the international community to work to rescue the civilians, the victims of the abduction, imprisonment, and enforced disappearance, the association has issued the human rights reports, annual reports, and some specific reports. And this report, which we are launching this evening in both Arabic and English, is an attempt to present a description, a complete description based on the testimonies of the victims. And it contributes to our reading of the human rights situation and liberties in the country, and it can guide human rights organizations. It is also very important for the local initiatives in order to exercise pressure on all parties to the conflict to release the detainees and those in detention. In this report, we are presenting the violation to the right to life, presenting the different reasons for death, including torture, the deliberate medical ignorance, or the shelling of the detention areas. And we provided testimonies from detainees whose cellmates died because medical aid was not provided. And we mentioned testimonies of fathers and mothers who do not have the complete body of their children to bury. A mother found half of her son's body and another found only his head. Many others did not find anything convincing them that their son died behind bars. The report also dealt with the violations to the right to freedom, the kidnapping, the enforced disappearances, to which activists were subject, pioneers of the word, camera holders, and other civilians were subjected to. The report touched only on torture and ill treatment of arbitrarily detained detainees, mentioning the most prominent methods monitored by the monitoring team, along with testimonies of men and women who were subjected to the most cruel treatment. And a lady, a detainee, screamed. She screamed that she will confess to killing the entire Yemeni people. And another lady witnessed the torture of her husband by pouring hot water on him and beating him until he lost consciousness. And he was also slapped and threatened that his wife will be raped in front of his eyes. The report relied on monitoring the violations between 2018 to 2022 in Sana'a, Aden, Marib, Taiz, and Dhamar, because each of these governorates represent one party. The Houthi group controls Sana'a, Dhamar, and parts of Taiz. The Transitional Council runs the city of Aden through its security apparatus known as the Security Belt, while the internationally recognized government runs Marib governorate and parts of Taiz. The Marib governorate was added in order to shed light on the airstrike against the community college by the coalition forces led by Saudi Arabia. The monitoring team was keen to monitor and document the violations committed by all conflict parties that we have mentioned, and to stand at the same distance from all those parties. The team in writing this report relied on the testimonies of 203 victims who were released or their family members as sources of information, with our commitment to the principle of inflicting no harm and ensuring the safety of the witnesses and the victims. And the team visited a number of places of detention in Sana'a, Aden, and Marib, and visited the bombing site in the community college in Dhamar, and attended the mass burial of the victims of the community college. The monitoring team and the association worked under very complex security conditions, and some of the women monitors were exposed to the dangers and threats of being arrested while carrying out their work. However, the human conscience in these people and these activists will not be extinguished, and mothers will continue to do the relentless work in order to bring justice to the victims and to hold accountable the perpetrators. We will see now a clip about the bombing of the community college in Dhamar. This is to the hearts of the mothers and the wives whose relatives died. The crime will not die, and we will try to achieve accountability and to hold accountable all those who caused this pain. Excuse us, we seem to have a technical problem with the sound. So this is a picture of the mass burial. So 73 bodies
نقول ما تعمل باين والله ما أقدر لا أرقد ولا أكل ولا أشرب ولا نداري بالدنيا أنا يا رب.
التبادل والإفراج عنه، ولكن مع الأسف بلغ الأسرة خبر أنه سيتم أنه تم قصف كلية المجتمع. عندما ذهبت الأسرة لم يجدوا سوى الجزء السفلي فقط من هذا الضحية. هذه صورة لحادثة الدفن الجماعي كانت بتاريخ 3 ديسمبر 2019. كنت أتمنى لو كان الصوت موجود. يعني كلامها موجع جدا، وهي تتحدث أنها لم تجد شيء من ابنها غير أرجله فقط، يعني لم تجد حتى جثة كاملة لدفنها وتذكرها. الإعادة ولكن بدون صوت مع الأسف. مبنى كلية المجتمع بدمار استخدمته جماعة الحوثي من أجل احتجاز المختطفين والمحتجزين القاتلين أيضا. الصليب الأحمر أعلن أن هناك 170 محتجزا على الأقل في هذا مكان الاحتجاز، وكان الصليب الأحمر قد زار هذا المرفق وتحدث مع المعتقلين.
مش معمول له أرجل، مش بالصحة.
فكان من الغريب أن
معمول له كائد من كائد.
التحالف بقصف هذا المكان وكانت الصليب الأحمر
ويعرف أن اللي يقولوا ما تعمل بين الله ما أقدر لا قوة ولا قوة ولا سلام ولا نداري بالدنيا.
الآن تعالج مشكلة الصوت ويتم إعادة تركيب الفلاش مرة أخرى. بعد مشاهدتنا لهذا المقطع، وإن كان الصوت حصل فيه مشكلة، لكن إن شاء الله سيتم معالجتها وإعادة عرضه مرة أخرى، أو ستجدونه على موقعنا بإذن الله. سوف ننتقل الآن إلى الأستاذة عائشة سعيد من فريق الرصد بتايز لتحدثنا عن النتائج التي خرج بها هذا التقرير.
To tell us about the conclusions of the report. The conclusions we have made based on our work since 2018 until 2022. Mr. Aisha. The conclusions drawn by the report preparation team . Can you hear me? Yes. So the conclusions drawn by the report preparation team through the work of the Abductees Mothers Association, which was focused on the issues of kidnapping, arrest, and enforced disappearance for nearly 7 years. We followed up the data on this issue and the curve of violations and releases with the role of the peace efforts, especially the Stockholm Agreement and the accompanying delegations or negotiations, and we can indeed put everyone in front of an accurate picture of this issue. We have watched what is happening on this issue moment by moment. We made some significant impact on the issue of the abductees. We can say that the periods of disappearance and the periods of detention have decreased to some extent, but the violating parties did not stop committing kidnapping, arresting, and practicing torture. And they are still using the pretext of the war and the state of emergency. And the perpetrators of these violations have not been punished and their victims have not been compensated, but rather the number of kidnapping and arresting parties has increased. And the situation has become worse because there are quasi-military groups and formations that perpetrate these violations, and this requires awareness raising and punishing the perpetrators of these violations. By studying the curve of the violations for the years 2018-2022, the analysis data team, the data analysis team have noted that there is a significant improvement in the human rights situation, and the cases of arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, and torture reported in 2022 were fewer than the cases monitored in 2018. In addition, the violations by the Houthi, the violators from the side of the Houthi group, the government, and the security-built forces in Aden have reduced the detention periods in many cases. These periods of detention decreased to several days from several months. But at checkpoints, people are arrested, and therefore this made the roads between governorates unsafe. And cases of kidnapping business people have spread, and especially in areas under the control of the Houthis. And these people are not released unless they pay ransoms. The violating authorities have recently reduced the periods of enforced disappearance of abductees and detainees. And they have reduced also the use of harsh physical torture in order to extract information or to force the abductees or the detainees to say what they are told. A number of old detainees were brought to trials in Sana'a and in Aden. And this is a step in the right direction, although it's a late step and marred by many violations of the criminal procedures code that is applicable in Yemen. But it is better than the complete absence of the legal procedures that prevailed in the past. The Houthi group continues to issue mass death sentences for arbitrarily detained detainees, according to trials that are described as not observing any principles of a fair trial. Detention conditions have improved in Bir Ahmed prison in the city of Aden since the beginning of 2019, after it was transferred to the Ministry of Interior in Aden, and it was subjected to the prison's regulations. But the situation worsened because of the political changes after mid-2019. And the detainees in that prison declared their hunger strike a number of times because of the ill treatment in the prison. The detention conditions have improved in the Saleh City Detention Center in Taiz. The prison administration has somewhat reduced the use of torture methods and allowed some families to visit their abducted relatives. However, deaths due to medical negligence recorded the highest rate in the prison compared to the rest of the prisons. The Security Intelligence Correctional Facility was opened in Sana'a in 2020, and the detainees were transferred from a number of previous places of detention to it. And in this prison, there are political opponents, human rights activists from different orientations and religious directions. And the prisoners enjoy conditions that are somehow much better than other prisons, as the detainees are allowed visits to make telephone calls to the families. And the prison is relatively clean, and detainees are allowed some exposure into play sports, but there is beating, violence, solitary confinement, denial of visits sometimes, and forcing the detainees to attend religious lessons by the Houthi group. These are practices that are being exercised in the prison. Thank you very much, Aisha Saeed from the monitoring team in Taiz. Thank you for this brief. And now we will watch some of the torture methods that we have monitored and recorded during the reporting period in different governorates. So we'll move now to the clip. Thank you, Asma. Torture is a crime that is not subject to the statute of limitations, as well as the enforced disappearance and the shelling of the detention centers. So now we will open the floor for discussion. If you want to have any comments or interventions or questions about the report, so you can raise your hands. Mr. Abdurrahman Burman. Thank you very much for this report. This is an excellent report, and the work of the association is very precise, actually, and they work professionally, and the report covered the different types of violations, the abductions, the detentions, and the torture, as well as the attacks on the physical integrity of the abductees by all the parties, not only one party. And I just have a question. The report talks about some governorates, but you do not cover other governorates that see mass violations, such as Hudayda Amran, Hajja Saada, as well as the governorate of Ib and in Shabwa. And in Hadramaut, the abductions or the detentions in these areas, although there are many cases in these governorates, they are not listed here, including, for example, in Hajja governorate, we had a report about the governorate of Hajja, and we were surprised actually by the sheer number of violations there. Thank you, Mr. Abdurrahman. For the selection of these governorates, actually, we have selected the governorates where we had offices for the association open, in addition to shedding the light on Dhamar because of the community college. In our future report, in our future reports, we will address other governorates. In the past, actually, we issued a report about Hudayda and another report about Taiz, and we had a report about torture in general, as well as a report about women. In addition to the annual reports that cover most of the governorates, where we have monitors and the collaborators. And thank you for your question, Mr. Abdurrahman. We move to Mr. Firas Hamdouni from DT Institute. Mr. Firas, you have the floor. Thank you, Najla, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Najla, Salam, and Aisha. Well, this is a painful reality, but hope is still there. My name is Firas Hamdouni, the program manager in DT Institute. We work on a number of programs in Yemen. We focus on the rule of law and documenting human rights violations by working with Yemeni civil society organizations. So I'd like to thank our partner, the team of the association. Thank you very much for all the work you have done in documenting and monitoring human rights violations, especially the enforced disappearance and the arbitrary detention victims. And you have also mentioned torture, so thank you for working on that. I'd like also to thank the team of the Rıghts organization. We have their team present here. They work with us on a project related to torture and other violations in Yemen. Thank you to the association's team for these videos that you presented and the report that we have seen. Your work is a quality work, and we would like to thank you for everything you do. And generally speaking, by casting light or through the project that is funded with the association, the focus was on supporting the issues of the forcibly disappeared people and the detainees in Yemen, monitoring, documenting, and mobilizing the public opinion in order to address this issue. Sadly, in Yemen, we see that impunity is something normal. Rather than being the exception, it is the rule, it is the norm in Yemen. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, this contributes to the impunity, contributes to the increased levels of violations and the recurrence of these violations to the international human rights law and the international humanitarian law. For the families of the victims, sometimes they hear about the news that the person has died or was abducted. This is sadly much easier than staying in the uncertainty about the fate of the person. In conclusion, I'd like to emphasize on something that there is an urgent need to have interventions to ensure the release of all the forcibly disappeared people, the detainees, the prisoners, with all the parties, the government, the STC, and the Houthis, in a way that protects the dignity of these people and their safety. And here I'd like to repeat my invitation to all the partners, including the association, Rıghts Human Rights Organization. I'd like to emphasize that we need to establish a mechanism for accountability, for investigation, for inquiry, in order to ensure the accountability, especially on torture, enforced disappearance, and detention, or arbitrary detention. And we need also, after this webinar or session, you said that you'll share the report with us. So I echo what you say. We need to communicate with the stakeholders in Yemen, with the UN Special Envoy, with all the decision makers, and those who can exercise an influence inside the country and regionally in order to grant these detainees the right to have a fair trial so they can be released. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Firas. And in turn, we would like to thank you, and we thank you for your cooperation in the project we worked on together. And now we have human rights. Good afternoon. I'm Akram Al-Shawafi. Yes, Akram, please. Akram Al-Shawafi from Watch for Human Rights. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Mothers of Abductees Association for the work they do on the file of the forcibly disappeared people. Can you hear me? Yes. And thank you for highlighting this file, which is very important. And sadly, it is not considered as an important file to be examined by the international community as a foundation for peace and justice in Yemen. We, in turn, we would like to thank all the partners who contributed to supporting this project. The DT Institute, they have focused on the issue of enhancing the international accountability, and we worked with the association on that. We benefit from the data and the reports of the Institute, and we communicated to them the data in order to establish a database concerning the violations in Yemen. So we work through our program to enhance the international accountability on torture issues, to establish a consolidated database for the victims in Yemen. We have to work together as a civil society towards that objective. We need to be one voice. We need to work together in order to address this issue and to shed light on it. We in our organization, we join hands with all partners at the local and international level in order to provide advocacy and redress and reparation for the victims. And also I do hope from the association to intensify its efforts and to extend hands to the partners, to the different partners, in order to join hands and to work together as they are leading this effort for years actually, and the association has become a very important resource in this field. So thank you very much. And as I said, we have established a website for the accountability and for the victims of torture, and we will provide different resources via this website. And we hope from the association and other partners to work with us so we can enhance this platform. This is a consolidated platform for all the partners, and we have a website, and I will write it here in the chat box. Thank you, Akram, for the work you do from Watch for Human Rights. And the association is extending its hands for whoever wants to cooperate. We'll move now to Ms. Taqiyya Nu'man. First of all, I'd like to praise the work that is done by the association, and like to thank them for the work they do and for casting light on the topic. And the work they do is great, remarkable. I have a question. So, do you have relations with the Bar Association, for example, in order to provide lawyers to defend the abductees? And the Ministry of Human Rights, for example, do you cooperate with them and with the international organizations in order to exercise pressure on the parties responsible for the abduction, the enforced disappearance, and because this issue requires the collaboration of efforts of everyone. And whenever we expand the circle of the collaborators, the less violations we will see and observe. So as stated by the gentleman from DT Institute, Firas, yes, in fact, we have to work together in order to prevent impunity, and we need to punish those responsible, so for others to have a lesson and not to repeat what the violators did. Thank you for this meeting. Thank you, Ms. Taqiyya, and we join voices actually with you that the Ministry of Human Rights has to bear its moral and ethical responsibility towards these people in areas controlled by the government and in other parts of the country, because these are Yemeni citizens and the ministry is responsible towards them. Now, Mr. Muhammad Gaizan. Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. And I'd like to thank the association for the work they do, its leadership and its work. As actually like to thank them for this report and for their efforts they make to shed light on the suffering of the abductees and the forcibly disappeared persons. I thank you for this report and the previous reports issued by the association. Well, in fact, the report is rich in information, statistics from the field, and this is very important for human rights organizations and media outlets. And therefore, I request you, the association and your media team, to circulate and to disseminate this report to everyone and to translate it as I am the Deputy Minister of Media, and therefore I invite the media outlets to quote this report and to present it on the media and to conduct seminars and panel discussions concerning this report. So this report remains alive and live. And this is in order to achieve our objective and to present the suffering of the abductees and the prisoners and the suffering of their families and to make sure that they are released as soon as possible and to provide compensations to them. So we are in contact with Ms. Ahmed Salam Al-Haj and your Taiz branch, and we are ready to cooperate to direct media outlets and media people to keep this issue alive and to discuss this report further. So I'd like to thank the association and the report team and to everyone here. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Ms. Yusra, you have the floor. Well, in fact, I'd like to salute the association for shedding the light on the violations that occurred since 2015. I'd like to thank all those who worked to prepare this report. We in the Office of the High Commissioner, we have the rule of law team, and we monitor and document all these violations, including the abductions, the arbitrary detention, the enforced disappearance, and the torture. And we are in contact with the association. We communicate with them, and we'd like to thank them for the efforts they make. And we hope that this cooperation and coordination continues. We are also in touch with all those in the authorities concerning the victims and certain cases, and we communicate with the Attorney General Office for cases that require intervention. We hope that this report is widely published and circulated on media outlets, and thank you for it. Thank you. Thank you, Yusra. And now we move to Muhammad Al-Ahmadi from Karama Foundation or organization. Peace be upon you. Yes, I can hear you. Do you hear me, Muhammad Al-Ahmadi from Karama organization from Geneva? I would like to thank you for all the efforts you are making. The association is doing great in the past years, despite the restrictions, the limited resources, and like to congratulate you for releasing this report. In the past, you issued very important reports as well, and you have teams in different governorates actually, and they deserve thanks and appreciation. We in our organization, we have the honor of participating with the association and sending some of the complaints to the special procedures of the United Nations. And we do hope that there could be more cooperation with you and with everyone in order to provide complaints to the human rights special procedures under the United Nations. I'd like to thank you for everything you do, and peace be upon you. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Najla Mu'min. Miss Najla. Dr. Mansour Al-Mashwari. Mansour Al-Mashwari, researcher in Columbia University. I would like to record my appreciation the efforts of the association, Mr. Salam, Najla, Aisha, and everyone. Actually, I have seen the report, and it entails a significant effort and substantial work that was done. I do agree, or I join voices with Mr. Mohammed Gaizan, Mr. Firas Hamdouni, and Abdurrahman Barman that what you do is great, but they do not receive proper coverage at the local and international level. And the association needs to deliver its voice to the decision makers and to speak up and to communicate with international organizations, human rights organizations, and others. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mansour. And now, Al Khair Abdullah. Amatullah Abdullah Ghalib, a social activist and the head of an initiative. First of all, I'd like to express my thanks to the Association of the Mothers of the Abductees for the work they have done actually to deliver their messages to the world to stop the violations against the abductees and the detainees. The report focuses on different types of violations committed by all parties to the conflict and the plight of the families. And here we invite the international community and international organizations to provide support to the association. And we denounce actually the international silence in the face of these crimes against the abductees and the detainees. And as already stated, we in Yemen, impunity is a culture, and it increases the recurrence of these violations. So I'd like to thank you for the great work that you have done, and we follow you on social media, and what you do is very organized and magnificent. Thank you. Thank you, Amatullah. So we still have Ulfat Al-Rifa'i. Please, Ulfat. I just wanted to ask about the community college shelling in Dhamar. Who is responsible for that shelling? Is it the Houthi group or the coalition? Alfat, you're the lawyer. The responsibility is a joint responsibility. Yes, the violation was committed by the coalition forces, but this does not exempt the Houthis from the responsibility. Detaining civilians in areas that are being targets for shelling and that are used for military purposes, this is a crime. And the coalition forces also committed a crime by shelling the community college because they did not observe the basic principles of the international law, the proportionality, the necessity, and the discrimination. And this is not the first time, actually, they attack detention centers. They shelled or they attacked the military police prison 2017 and other places in 2017. And in these places, civilians were detained. And even the combatants are not, the detained combatants are not a legitimized target for shelling. especially as the ICRC paid visits to these areas. So it's a joint responsibility, and it's a big crime, actually. On one day, 134 detainees were killed in cold blood, and the rules and the principles of the international law were not observed, and therefore the perpetrators need to be held accountable. Thank you, Alfat. Do we have any more questions or interventions? Just to add, Ms. Najla, because we have an excellent number of people here, the association will publish this report on social media. So I hope from the followers of social media to comment, to react, and to share the report, and to share the tweets and the posts. And we want also to hear the opinion of the specialized people on the following issue. It's always that, how can I say it? There's always, they always say that the responsibility, they always say that human rights organizations in Yemen, they monitor and document without results. Yes, this is the reality. There is no effective judicial system in Yemen, and there is no independent judiciary in Yemen. If there is such a system in some governorates, the rules and the rulings are not being implemented or executed. And therefore, we have here a vicious cycle. We monitor and document without results. And if people are prosecuted, the courts are ineffective. And if they are effective, the rulings are not executed. And Yemen is not part of the Fourth Geneva Convention to apply these rulings through the ICC. So we are in a vicious cycle. And I would like to ask the participants, when you see a poster from the association, please, I request you to comment, to react to these posts, to provide us with your opinion, to tell us what should be done from the side of the international organizations and the local organizations. If you have comments, please provide us with these comments, and thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for their excellent interventions and their appreciation to the work of the association. And thank you for that. And I'd like also to thank Mr. Firas from DT Institute, because he is the driver actually of this report and the work that ensued. And his role was very remarkable. So I'd like to thank him. I just want to emphasize, as indicated by Firas, sorry, that we need your comments, we need your inputs. Maybe you can propose things to us, you can help us in improving our work, you can participate with us in some of the activities. So we cannot see ourselves and you can see us. So you can help us and you can work with us to deliver our messages and voices and to try to provide solutions for this issue. So we have done everything possible in our hands to deliver our voices and to work to have the detainees released and to provide redress to their family members. But of course, there are shortcomings and the resources are limited, and therefore the participation of everyone is very important, is instrumental for us, and this will improve the quality of our work, and we are very appreciative to you. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Najla. Thank you, Ahmed Salam. You are our inspirer here, Mr. Akram Shawafi. Thank you, and I just want to comment on what has been said by Mr. Firas on this issue in particular. We do face the same problem raised by Firas. We work in a vicious cycle. and even the victims themselves started to lose faith in civil society organizations, and this is impacting our work and is impacting the responsiveness from the victims to our work. So there are steps that have to be done, but they are not being done. So I do believe that we need to intensify our efforts, and we need to do networking and collaboration between different organizations. For example, we can communicate with the Attorney General Office in order to refer some individual cases and have them prosecuted. There is a kind of responsiveness from the AG office, but we need to do more. And if we work together as civil society organizations and not to work in silos, actually, I believe that we can achieve something collectively. We need to have a collective strategy that is adopted by different organizations, and this can be useful to present some sample cases. We can even present 1 or 2 or 3 cases to be prosecuted, and this will restore the confidence in the work of the civil society organizations, because the communities believe that civil society organizations are biased, and they lost confidence in them. So we need to move to practical steps in order to prepare, for example, model cases. We work on them together, and we in Watch for Human Rights, we will join hands with everyone who is working in this direction. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Akram. And yes, networking between organizations working together will achieve greater impact. Dr. Arif Al-Haj, please. I will add one point. One of the key weaknesses in this issue is that the follow-up is incomplete. This is a humanitarian issue. This is the issue of every Yemeni person. And what is happening is that there are shortcomings here, and some people believe that this is the case of the mothers only and the family members of the abductees or the detainees. So they view these cases as being personal cases or family issues that are for the family members only. And sometimes they think that this is the issue of the association only. This is the issue of every person, and this issue has to be addressed because there are shortcomings, and there is a moral responsibility on civil society organizations in the country to address that. If you see that this case or this issue does not receive the space it deserves, and there is a moral regression here, and the civil society organizations in Yemen, they need to reconsider their positions and what they do, and this issue should be in the forefront of their efforts and their activities. Thank you, Dr. Arif. I believe we are done with this webinar, with this meeting. We have launched our report, Justice for the Abductees. We'll be very happy if you share this report and invite others to share it. And if you can read it and provide us with your feedback. You need to, maybe you can react to our posts on social media. Thank you, everyone. We have the honor of your company in this meeting, and hopefully we can meet again in other activities by the association. Thank you.